Just over a month to go in the Buffalo Sabres season, Dylan Cousins moved out of the Sabres core. Who else in the core has to have a big month here if they want to remain in it? What's on the line for individuals in this last month? Who needs to get going? We'll get to my top 3 players that fit that description, an update on last place as well, and how the Sabres are doing at the bottom of the standings. Coming up on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in, and thanks for listening to this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast and making us your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. That does include checking us out on our YouTube channel where you can watch the show, like and subscribe us there, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Sneaky Joe DiBiase here on a Wednesday. It is a game day. Sabres and Red Wings tonight, 7:30 on TNT. We've got some big picture stuff to get to on today's show. Little peek behind the curtain here. I've kind of talked about this with a few of our texters and, some of the other lockdown hosts that are covering teams that are near the bottom of the standings. And also, I'm well practiced at doing a podcast where we get to March and the Sabres are out of it. And they're completely dead. This is actually let's see. I started doing this podcast in October of 2019. It's crazy. It feels like it has only been 2 years because they've all been the same, but except for one. But it's coming up on 6 years. So, I've been doing the podcast since October 2019. So let's see. But by this time in March of 2020, they're out of it. But then there's the COVID shutdown. So 21, they're out of it because it's the 16-game losing streak, right, under Ralph Kruger. They're out of it in 22. They're out of it. They're not out of it in 23. They're out of it in 24, and now they're out of it here. So I guess this is my 4th go-round, really, getting to this point in the season and not really having a playoff race to talk about. And what that incurs, I see the numbers on our shows, and I talk to our fans about it, a few at least. And the interest in the game to game isn't necessarily the same. So you will see us do more big picture topics on game days rather than like a game preview. We'll still talk about the games after they happen, but you're not going to get probably from here to the end of the season, like a whole 25-minute preview of Sabres and Red Wings on Wednesday night. Just kind of how the show ends up going once they're out of the race and we hit March. So that's kind of what's ahead on today's show and going forward. We will talk plenty about Sabres and Red Wings, though, on tomorrow's show. So come back for that on Thursday. That'll be a part of our rundown. Today, though, who needs to get results in the final month of this regular season for the Buffalo Sabres, as Kevin Adams has talked about, the core getting a shakeup with the Dylan Cousins trade, and beyond that even, not being afraid to move on from pieces in this Buffalo Sabres core. So there could be more on the way. I asked our texters, I asked our listeners on Twitter as well, who you would like to see, who you need to see more from in this last month. And that could be a 2-part question. One is who you want to see more from that has not been good and needs to play better. And 2, someone that you're still open to being a part of the core. I think there are some individuals that maybe even I'll get to where you might go, oh, I don't even care if he has a good month because I'm already done. There are guys on this team that fans are already going to be done with. So we'll get to a couple of those guys coming up as well. A little bit of an update, though, on what we talked about yesterday and what has really been the biggest story in Sabres world in the last 24 hours easily, which is the Paul Bissonnette, Rasmus Dahlin report talk from Bissonnette that Dahlin told Kevin Adams that he needs things turned around on this team or he's going to want out. And then Dahlin said that's not true. And then Bissonnette went on with Jeff Merrick later in the day and kind of walked it back. Not really. He never said, Bissonnette never said that what he said wasn't true. He said, all I did was pass along something that I had. that I had heard from somebody that I trust. All I did was pass it along. He didn't say that he lied about it or made it up. Now, one thing that Bissonnette said there that I do want to point to, that I think maybe he'll learn this, maybe even in this last day he's learned this. Bissonnette learning his reach, his word does carry weight. He is not an insider at all, and he even made it clear that he isn't one. But in today's media landscape, it doesn't have to be an insider to get information. In fact, a lot of times now it isn't. We learn through other avenues, and that happens a little bit more in other sports. But whether it's something that's, posted by somebody on social media, or if it's coming from the own player's mouth, or whatever it is, maybe it's a blogger that has a scoop or something. The days of just beat reporters and NHL insiders having every single news item, it's not all them. Now, they're the ones with the most credibility, and they're the ones that, with their process, you would trust the most. But Paul Bissonnette does a podcast that is the number one hockey podcast in the country by audience. It is the number one podcast in America, and he also is on the TNT broadcast. He has become a big voice in the hockey world, and people listen to him. So when he says something, it does carry weight. A lot of people are going to believe him. And when Merrick told him that like, hey man, like, guys, your voice carries a lot of weight. And Bissonnette was kind of like, no, what do you mean? I'm not an insider. And maybe he's learned since then, I would hope so, that just because you're not an insider, dude, doesn't mean that people don't think you know what you're talking about. I mean, I'm not a guy that gets scoops or insider information. I'm not really someone that cares about that. But if I had something and presented it that way, I would have the self-awareness to know that some people, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people are going to think, if I came on this podcast and said, someone I talked to said Tage Thompson wants out if they don't turn things around, I would expect some people are going to believe that. And Bissonnette kind of pushing it off like, I don't know why everyone believed it. Of course we believed it. So you're not nobody. You're just not an insider. So that's kind of how I saw the Bissonnette thing and his walking it back a little bit. It's a different media landscape. You host the number one hockey podcast in the world. You got to think that you saying that is going to make an impact. And it's going to make it to Dahlin even. Within a couple of hours, it's going to make it to Dahlin. So that's where we stand on that. He kind of walked it back. Dahlin said, of course, that it wasn't true. There is one other thing I want to point to about this Dahlin thing. It's a little weird to me. And I don't think it really matters to the scope of whether or not he'll get traded or whether he asked to be traded or whatnot. Just one thing I caught that to me seems to be a little bit manufactured from Rasmus Dahlin. And that is that if you watch the video of Rasmus Dahlin saying that I never asked to be traded, I never said anything, Matt Beauvais asks him the question, and Matt Beauvais puts it to him, and Dahlin goes, who? And then he says, Paul Bissonnette. You're like, who wants to be traded? He's like, you do. I do. Like, that's he said it as though he had never heard of it before. He had not heard what Bissonnette had said. That's how he acted. Yet, Mike Harrington, Sabre beat reporter for the Buffalo News, tweeted out that Dahlin requested to speak to the media. So I'm pretty sure that's not that common, that a player would seek out the beat reporters after a practice like that. So why, of course, would Dahlin be asking to speak with the media? It would be to clear the air about the Paul Bissonnette thing. But then when he got asked about it, he acted as though he had no idea what they were talking about, which, again, I don't even know how much I care about this, but kind of weird. Almost makes it feel like Dahlin's shock was completely manufactured. Again, it doesn't need to matter. And maybe there's more context to that about maybe was it the team that actually, requested the media and not Dahlin specifically saying, I want to talk to them after. because if he did, then he knew about it already. And then that means he pretended to be surprised by it. But again, I don't really think that matters to the overall story of the last 24 hours, if I'm being honest. But weird, for sure. All right, when we come back, 1 month left in the season, just about. And I want to get to what individuals we need to be keeping the closest eye on. Rasmus Dahlin, you don't have to figure anything out about his game in the final month of the season. Tage Thompson, we'll see if he gets to 50 goals, for instance, but you don't have to really figure anything out about Tage Thompson. Who do we still need to see play well? Do we need to form an opinion on between now and the end of the year? I got 3 guys that I think fit that profile, and I got some text answers as well when we come back here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is presented by FanDuel. March Madness is here next week, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when you first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. Or if you want to run over to hockey or to golf right now, you got the big tournament tomorrow. Majors are coming up as well. Pick your favorites. I got my eye on a couple of Sabre anytime goal bets coming up. And of course, for the tournament, I've got some underdogs that I'm looking at. That's how you really get the big odds, is when you're looking at the double-digit seeds, for instance. FanDuel app's super easy to use. When I win, I get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. All the live betting features as well. So visit FanDuel.com. Get in on the college hoops action all tournament long, again, at FanDuel.com. Sneaky Joe DiBiase back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Sabres game night. We'll talk about Sabres and Red Wings tomorrow on the show. 7:30 puck drop on TNT. The Sabres have 19 games remaining in the regular season, and they have a month and 5 days remaining in the regular season. So in those games, I've got 3 players that I really want to see a lot from because I think their futures are at stake. And it might be dependent somewhat on how they play. Some guys, I don't think it matters anymore. Now, I'll run through a couple of texts and tell you why there's some of these guys that I did not list. One, for instance, person said Zach Benson. I know you said he's an analytics darling, but I feel like he should be like Levi, dominating and gaining skill down in the AHL. For instance, on Benson actually isn't eligible yet to play in the AHL. He will be next year, if I have that right. And I don't think the next month matters. I don't think there is any circumstance in which Zach Benson is in the AHL next season. None. He has been too good with the Sabres. He needs to get stronger and be able to score goals better and produce offense. He needs to be able to put up more points. But analytics darling, he is the number 1 Sabre on the season in expected goals for percentage, better than every other player on the team. And he's a great penalty killer. He's a very good defensive player. I'm not moving Zach Benson to the AHL. So for me, sure, I'd like to see him play well, but I think the test for Benson is, what does he get done in the offseason? How much bigger does he get? How much stronger? How much faster does he get? I don't think there's anything he's going to do in the final month that's going to really, change my opinion too much on where he's at. Now, to get to another guy that someone wrote in, which was Peyton Krebs. One texter said Peyton Krebs. Again, I'm past the point of no return personally on Peyton Krebs. I do not think he is somebody that should be around or critical. He's not a part of the core at all. And I don't think he's really capable of getting himself into that mix. He's still young. He's still only 24 years old, but it's over, man. The idea that he is going to become what we once thought 3 years ago, where he was Vegas's number 1 prospect. And then at one point he was one of the Sabres' top prospects, right? He isn't going to produce offensively enough. The days of thinking he could become some 50 assist guy as a second line, third line center are over. He's a bottom 6 guy. He's nice. He's pretty good defensively. He's an energizer bunny in a way. He throws his body around. He stands up for teammates. He gets in fights. But he absolutely is not a core piece of this football team. So I'm out on Peyton Krebs being a long-term member, so therefore I don't really care how he does in the final month of the season, if I'm being frank. Now I'll get to my top 3, and these would be the most popular 3 answers that I received. Number 3, players that need to produce in the last month of the year. Number 1, or number 3, I should say, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is struggling a lot this season. Now, he is coming off one of his better games lately against Edmonton, but still, the macro of his year has been subpar, for sure. I mean, he, by save percentage, is flirting with his worst season in the NHL with an 892. He was at an 891 2 years ago. Some of the biggest regression year to year that any of the NHL goaltenders has seen from last year to this year. So not hopeful about where we stand with that. If you look at where Luukkonen stands in some of the advanced numbers on the year, we obviously go to goals saved above expected for Luukkonen. And I just had it. Where did he go? I've got to go to page 2. That's why. 62nd in the NHL out of 90 goaltenders. 62nd. So below average, far below average, 2.75 goals saved below expected. Not good. Not good at all for Luukkonen. I think it's curious why this has happened. He made a style change to his game last year where, talked about this with Owen Parker, Bulldog's son at WGR. He now works on the morning show. Former, junior hockey goaltender, goalie coach now at the high school level. And I was talking to him last year about what did Luukkonen start doing differently? Because Owen obviously knows his stuff technically on goaltenders. Giant goalie son, if you don't know who I'm talking about. And he said last year, Luukkonen started playing deeper in his net. That he was out on the top of his crease a lot in the first couple of years of his career. He was attacking shooters, kind of the way Levi does, maybe not to that extreme, but he was out on his crease, challenging shooters, trying to use his athleticism and his ability to move side to side more than maybe his frame and his size. Last year, he sinks deeper into his net. He's along the goal line a little bit more often. He's in the blue paint more often. He's not as much way out and sometimes getting, out of the net, flopping around out there because you are reliant more on athleticism at that point. And he used his frame and he used his size for those angles. And it went great. This year, I think he's doing the same thing. It's just not working the same. I don't know why. So kind of confusing why that has happened, given that he seemed to continue with the adjustment that he had made last season. But the numbers show what they show. 892 save percentage and ranked 62nd in goals saved above expected. Now, why I think he needs to play well in the last month of the year? Because I don't know what Kevin Adams has up his sleeve. And if it's not Kevin Adams, a new general manager, I have no idea what that person would have up their sleeve or if they want a new guy or what. Because, listen, the talk of Adams shaking up the core, Luukkonen is a part of the core, and he is one of the core members that has not lived up to his standard this year. They did just sign him. Keep that in mind. So trading him seems a little far-fetched, but his contract is not so bad that you couldn't if you really wanted to. Like, if the Sabres decided right now, you know what? I'm done riding the Luukkonen roller coaster. 1 year he's bad. The next year he's really good. The next year he's bad again. I'm done with the Luukkonen roller coaster. You know what I want to do? I want to call up Devin Levi, and I want to pair him with as solid of a veteran goalie as I can get my hands on. I want to swap out Luukkonen for a veteran that I know what I'm getting to pair with my potentially star rookie that we're still waiting for that star rookie season. If you wanted to do that, Luukkonen's out of here. And if he plays bad down the stretch, you might feel more open to that idea. If he plays well, then you might feel like Luukkonen and Levi can roll into next year. My number 2 player that I think needs to play well in the final month of the year is Jack Quinn. Jack Quinn, because I don't want him to get to where Dylan Cousins was, where he's just kind of lost, and I don't know how to solve his game, what to do about his game. And he is an RFA at the end of the year. 10 goals, 14 assists, 24 points, a 45.6 expected goals for percentage. That's fourth worst among any forward on the Sabres. Only worse, Sam Lafferty, Beck Malenstein. Surprisingly, JJ Peterka is also lower than that. But one thing Peterka's got on one of these other numbers, goals above replacement, another number that you can look at Evolving Hockey and other advanced sites. Peterka's the number one Sabre on that. Quinn, meanwhile, second worst forward. Only Lafferty is worse. Even strength offense above replacement, dead last on the team offensively. Just there's nothing you look at with Quinn. Goals above replacement, like the by percentile in the league, he's in the single digits for offense. He's in the 40th percentile for defense. You're just not getting anything from Jack Quinn. He, to me, looks like he's had skating problems all year. I am so sick and tired of seeing him try the same move over and over and over when he comes in on a one-on-one, which is he tries to toe drag it to the middle and pull it back. The pullback, it's the same move every time from Jack Quinn. He's got to get more in his game and in his repertoire, or he's got to learn to be able to finish these shots. Because to go back to when he was drafted, that's what I thought they were getting when they picked him, which was not a complete offensive or even two-way player. It was, this guy's a shooter and he's going to score goals. And he doesn't. Not right now. He doesn't. So I think they need to get more from Jack Quinn in the final month. I don't think that changes his contract status, but again, who are they going to look to trade in the offseason? If they're looking to turn over the roster and go from the youngest team in hockey to more of a veteran team, well, Jack Quinn for some middle six veteran kind of feels like a trade that could happen this summer if he doesn't kick it into gear. And finally, my number one player that no doubt has to have a final month, and this is mostly because I think there's a decision to be made on him in the offseason. That is Mattias Samuelsson. Mattias Samuelsson, who on the year has a 45.3% expected goals for percentage, a 47% Corsi for percentage, two of the lowest marks on the Sabres. His ice time under Lindy Ruff has cratered. After once upon a time being Don Granato's top pair defenseman with Rasmus Dahlin, playing 22 minutes, 11 seconds per night 2 years ago, and then 20 minutes and 30 seconds last year, he is averaging 18 minutes and 52 seconds. His ice time has gone down by more than 2 minutes. More than 2.5 minutes, really. That's a lot per night. And you have him being at the scene of the crime when Tage Thompson was hit against New Jersey by Steven Neuwiesen, and Samuelsson did nothing. And, Owen Power was on the ice too, but Samuelsson was closer. Samuelsson is the older player of the two, and Samuelsson is the stronger player of the two. And he's the guy who, well, I guess Power got paid too, but whatever. He was the number one most wanted after that happened. So there's that. That's his defining moment right now of the season. He's getting a chance to play with Dahlin more and more down the stretch here. Lindy putting that pairing back together to see what they've got. He's also been a healthy scratch at times this year, and we know about the injury history. All of that added up, we don't really have much to go on right now that is positive for Mattias Samuelsson. And this offseason, if the Sabres want to buy him out, they can do it this offseason for only $714,000 per year. Now, it's for 10 years. It's a decade, but it's $714,000 per year as a cap hit. Nothing. That's nothing right now. The NHL cap doesn't go up like the NFL cap does, but it's about to go up again, and it probably will go up once or twice more in the next 10 years. That money means nothing, especially for a team that consistently doesn't spend to the cap. So to me, ridding yourself of that financial commitment seems very appetizing right now. If it were me, I'd lean towards doing it. I know it's for a long time, but it's so low of a number that I'd be in. And I'm not really worried about what I lose as an asset. What am I getting in exchange for him? A second or third round pick? I'm just not worried about it. I would give up on it. I would buy him out. Is there enough he could do in the final month? Because I'm not like all the way in on that. I'm leaning that way. Like for me personally, I would be open to him having a great month playing with Rasmus Dahlin and saying, all right, let me run it back, give him one more year. Maybe I'll buy him out after that. Year to year. kind of situation at this point. Although I should look to see if the buyout is actually as easy to do the year after. I could tell you very quickly here. And it's, no, see, this is where if you wait till next year to buy out Mattias Samuelsson, I don't know why this happens this way. This is according to Puckpedia. The cap hit will double. And instead of $714,000 over 10 years, it will be $1.4 million for 8 years. That would be the buyout. Actually, I can tell you why that is the case. It is because only 33% of your cap hit gets bought out when you're only 25 years old. That's an interesting part of the CBA that I didn't know. The moment he turns 26, here we go. The moment that Samuelson turns 26, his buyout, instead of paying 33% of the money like you would have to this season, you'd have to pay 67% of the money. So if they're going to do it, they should probably do it now. So for him to talk people out of that in the organization that it might be selling that idea, he's going to have a really strong month. Samuelson, number one on my list. You got to do it now or forever hold your peace. When we come back, let's take a quick look at what's happening at the bottom of the standings. We've talked about how low the Sabres can get, and I did ask a prospect guy about what's on the line for draft order, and there's a line in the sand that I'd like the Sabres to not cross over, and I'll explain when we get back here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast presented by Indeed. You just realized that your business needed to hire somebody yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling. Get your job post seen on other sites. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Excuse me. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Been in a spot where you need the right hire, like yesterday. The pressure is on. Every day without the right person can be a setback. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs comes in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now, you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now. Support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, the Sabres and the Red Wings tonight. And as it stands now, after the Sabres win over Edmonton the other night, and Pittsburgh winning over Vegas, by the way, the Sabres still sit third from the bottom in the NHL, third from the bottom with 56 points in 63 games. There are not a lot of teams, by the way, that are like on track for historically bad seasons. I mean, the Sabres are on track for 75 points, and that's third worst in the league. There have been years where that is actually, sixth worst in the league. So behind them, Chicago at 49 points and San Jose at 43 points. I asked a prospect guy this week, hey, this draft, where's the line? Where is there a drop-off? And I think I had referenced this earlier in the week, but now I got confirmation on it that, there's a drop-off. There's a drop-off after 4. That the top 4 are all pretty close together. And then after that, big gap. So you don't want to fall below the 4th pick in the NHL draft. So important maybe to not climb up to 28th out of 30th. That would be passing 2 more teams. I don't think the Sabres are going to do that. This also is not so important that I am rooting actively for the Sabres to lose these games. I'd rather they go on a giant win streak at the end of the year and make me think that it's possible that they could actually be good next year, because I'm going to need that for this summer. I think a lot of fans will. But reality, striking what their standings is going to be, they are 1 point behind Nashville with a game in hand. Nashville has won 4 in a row, and that is the biggest reason why the Sabres have dropped below them. Seattle, meanwhile, who's been up and down lately, they're at 58 points, 2 points ahead of the Buffalo Sabres. They've played 2 more games than Buffalo. And then finally, Pittsburgh wins against Vegas, 62 points. Philly actually also 62 points. They've lost 5 in a row. So the Sabres are 6 points behind both of those teams, but they have 4 games in hand on Pittsburgh. So when they make up those games, they are going to be very close to the Penguins in the standings, if not even above them. So That's the team to watch for right now. Here's the way to do it. If you want to do both things, you don't want to root against the Sabres. You want to root for them still in these games, but you also, knowing that the playoffs are unrealistic, don't want them to climb in the standings too much. Watch the Sabre games, root for them to win, do your thing. Maybe root, throw a little down on FanDuel if you want. And then whenever the Penguins are on, whenever the Kraken are on, whenever Nashville's on, root for those teams to win. Best of both worlds. If both teams go win the rest of the way, then the Sabres still remain in 30th place. So that is how I would approach the end of the year. Because again, there's only a little bit on the line, but there does appear to be something. You don't want to pick fifth. You want to pick in the top four, it appears, as of this moment. So as the Sabres schedule approaches, they do have, by the way, one of the tougher schedules in the league. So I don't know how much you really have to worry about this. Tonight, Kraken against Canadiens at 10:30. And then tomorrow on Thursday, you actually have the battle of the last two teams in the league. San Jose plays Chicago. A little bit of a tank battle. Feels like if Chicago wins that game, San Jose's got the top lottery odds locked in. But they probably do anyway. They're 6 points clear of Chicago. So that's how it's looking currently at the bottom. If you would like to chime in on your thoughts on that race, if you've got any, or more so on players you want to see play well in the final month, be sure to hit up our text club, join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres. You can also reach out to us on social media. I'm at Sneaky Joe on Blue Sky, at Sneaky Joe Sports on Twitter, and you can follow the podcast account at Locked On Sabres. We will talk to you tomorrow here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Sabres and Red Wings, one thing to get to, of course. And if you're looking for some more league-wide topics with all the coverage from our local experts tackling the league-wide stories that matter, find Locked On NHL on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Talk to you tomorrow here in the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.